I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all the wonderful messages of support from so many of you.
The line between loyalty and royalty has shattered. Today we expose the catastrophic fallout behind palace walls that forced Prince Edward to abruptly cut ties with Queen Camilla. At the heart of this royal war, the sudden, ruthless eviction of Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, from the Crown Estate. Is this a calculated act of revenge by a modernizing monarchy, or the final breaking point for a family fractured by shifting allegiances? This is the inside story of a devastating betrayal, an explosive phone call, and the escalating battle for power, pride, and property at the very center of the British monarchy. The phone call that ended without a goodbye. There are moments inside the British royal family that never reach the public. No press release is issued, no palace spokesperson steps forward to offer a carefully worded statement. No royal correspondent gets the tip-off that something significant has shifted behind closed doors. These are the moments that travel instead through hushed conversations between trusted insiders, through the careful language of sources who speak only on condition of anonymity, and through the kind of silence that, inside palace walls, speaks louder than any official announcement ever could. The phone call between Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and Queen Camilla was one of those moments. And according to sources familiar with the situation, what happened during that call has left a mark on the royal family that no amount of polished public appearances can erase. The call reportedly took place in the early weeks of 2025, during a period already thick with tension inside the House of Windsor. Those close to both parties say the conversation began with the kind of restrained civility that senior royals are trained from birth to maintain, even when emotions are running high beneath the surface. But civility has its limits, and according to insiders, it did not take long for that call to reach its breaking point. The subject at the center of the exchange was not a matter of state. It was not a disagreement over royal duties or a dispute about public engagements. It was something far more personal, far more loaded, and for Prince Edward, far more unacceptable. The removal of Tom Parker Bowles from the Sandringham estate had set something in motion that a brief phone call was never going to resolve. Sources say Camilla initiated the call. Those who know her well describe the Queen Consort as a woman who rarely raises her voice and even more rarely confronts matters directly when indirection is available to her. But on this occasion, the situation demanded she speak. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, had been removed from one of the most historically significant properties in the royal portfolio, and the people believed to be behind that decision were not strangers to her. They were family. That reality made the conversation not just uncomfortable, but dangerous in the way that only family disputes can be. Because when the people on the other side of a grievance are bound to you by blood and duty, there is nowhere to take the argument that does not carry consequences. Prince Edward, according to those familiar with his temperament, is not a man who responds well to being cornered. He is described by people who have worked alongside him as measured, deliberate, and deeply protective of the boundaries he has drawn around his family and his position within the institution. He does not court drama, he does not seek confrontation, but he also does not retreat when he believes a line has been crossed. And by the time Camilla's call reached him, insiders suggest Edward had already made up his mind about where he stood on the matter of Tom Parker Bowles and Sandringham. The call, in that sense, was never going to end well. What was said in the minutes before Edward ended the call remains a matter of speculation, but sources who have spoken to people close to both camps paint a consistent picture. Camilla reportedly pressed Edward directly on the decision surrounding her son's removal. Edward, by all accounts, was not prepared to reverse course or offer the kind of sympathetic language that might have softened the exchange. The conversation escalated in the way that quiet conversations between people with deeply held positions often do, not with shouting, not with threats, but with the kind of cold, clipped precision that signals to anyone listening that the person speaking has closed a door and has no intention of reopening it. And then the call ended, not with a farewell, not with the diplomatic courtesy that might have left space for the matter to be revisited. Edward, according to sources, terminated the call abruptly, leaving Camilla mid-sentence. For those who understand the unspoken codes of royal communication, that act alone carried an unmistakable message. In a family where composure is currency and every gesture is weighted with meaning, putting down the phone on the Queen Consort is not a small thing. It is a statement. And the statement Edward made in that moment reverberated far beyond the two people on that call. Palace insiders say the fallout was immediate, even if it remained invisible to the outside world. Those in the inner circle who became aware of what had happened reportedly described the atmosphere in the days that followed as noticeably strained. Scheduled interactions between Edward's household and Camilla's staff were handled with an extra layer of formality that insiders say was not accidental. Messages that might ordinarily have been passed informally were instead routed through official channels. The warmth, however measured it had been to begin with, appeared to have drained from the relationship entirely. What makes this episode particularly significant is not just the abruptness of Edward's response, but what it reveals about the deeper tensions that have been quietly building for years. The phone call was not the beginning of a conflict. It was the surface expression of something that had been accumulating beneath the polished exterior of royal unity for a very long time. To understand why Edward ended that call the way he did, it is necessary to understand what led to Tom Parker Bowles being removed from Sandringham in the first place. Because that decision did not happen in a vacuum. It happened at the end of a long chain of events, shifting alliances, and quiet power moves that have slowly reshaped the landscape of the modern monarchy. And as the next chapter reveals, the story of Tom Parker Bowles and Sandringham goes far deeper than a simple family disagreement. Tom Parker Bowles and the estate. Question: to understand why the removal of Tom Parker Bowles from the Sandringham estate sent shockwaves through the inner circles of the British royal family, it is first necessary to understand who Tom Parker Bowles is and what his presence on that estate actually represented. Because to reduce this story to a simple dispute over property access would be to miss the point entirely. Tom Parker Bowles is not merely a food writer and television personality who happens to be the son of the Queen Consort. He is, in the eyes of many royal observers, one of the most quietly influential figures operating in the orbit of the modern monarchy. And his connection to Sandringham was never just logistical. It was symbolic of something far larger. Tom Parker Bowles was born in December of 1974, the eldest child of Camilla Shand, who would later become Duchess of Cornwall and eventually Queen Consort, and Andrew Parker Bowles, the former brigadier whose marriage to Camilla ended in divorce in 1995. From the very beginning, Tom's life existed at the intersection of aristocratic tradition and intense public scrutiny. As his mother's relationship with King Charles deepened and eventually became the defining romance of the modern monarchy, Tom found himself navigating a position that carried no official title, but demanded an enormous amount of quiet diplomacy. He had to be seen as supportive without overstepping, present without being intrusive, loyal without appearing to leverage his mother's proximity to the throne for personal gain. By most accounts, he managed that balance with considerable skill for many years. Tom built a genuine reputation as a food critic and author entirely on his own merits, publishing well-received books and contributing to respected publications. He cultivated a public persona that was charming, unpretentious, and deliberately distanced from the graver business of palace politics. But those who watch the royal family closely have long understood that the public persona and the private reality are rarely identical. Behind the relaxed exterior of the celebrated food writer was a man with deep access to the most powerful household in Britain. And that access, insiders say, extended well beyond dinner tables and literary festivals. Sandringham, the sprawling Norfolk estate that has served as the royal family's private retreat for generations, holds a particular kind of significance within the monarchy. It is not a working palace in the official sense. It does not host state functions or diplomatic receptions in the way that Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle do. What Sandringham represents is something arguably more precious to the royals who cherish it. It is private, it is personal, It is the place where the family retreats from the weight of public duty and attempts, however imperfectly, to simply exist as a family. Access to Sandringham is therefore not just a practical matter. It is a measure of trust, of belonging, and of standing within the inner sanctum of the House of Windsor. Tom Parker Bowles had, over the years following his mother's marriage to King Charles in April of 2005, developed a familiarity with Sandringham that went beyond what many observers considered appropriate for someone without an official royal role. Sources say he was a regular presence on the estate during key family gatherings, that his movements there attracted little formal scrutiny for years, and that his access was widely understood to be an extension of the trust and affection the king holds for Camilla. For a long time, that arrangement appeared to sit comfortably within the unspoken agreements that govern how the extended royal circle operates. But comfort inside the monarchy has a habit of becoming complacency, and complacency has a habit of generating resentment. The question of exactly when and why the decision was made to curtail Tom's presence at Sandringham is one that insiders have been reluctant to address directly. What sources do confirm is that the removal did not come without warning signs. There had been, according to people familiar with the situation, a gradual accumulation of concern among certain members of the royal household about the regularity and the nature of Tom's access to the estate. Those concerns were reportedly not expressed openly at first. They circulated instead in the quiet, careful way that palace grievances almost always do, through intermediaries, through pointed observations made in private, and through the kind of meaningful silences that those trained in royal protocol learn to read with precision. What eventually crystallized those concerns into action remains a matter of some sensitivity. Sources suggest that a specific incident or series of interactions in late 2024 prompted a more formal review of who had authorized Tom's ongoing access and on what basis that authorization rested. The outcome of that review, insiders say, was the decision to remove him from the estate. The manner in which that removal was communicated and carried out is described by those close to the situation as abrupt, clinical, and deliberately final. There was no gradual withdrawal of access, no quiet suggestion that future visits might be scaled back. The decision, when it came with the kind of decisiveness that signals not a temporary measure, but a permanent one. For Camilla, the impact of that decision was immediate and deeply personal. Whatever the official reasoning behind her son's removal, the message it carried to her was unambiguous. The people who had pushed for or endorsed this outcome were drawing a boundary around Sandringham that excluded someone she loved. And the fact that those people were members of the very family she had spent 2 decades carefully cultivating relationships with made the wound considerably sharper. When she reached for the phone to address the matter directly, she was not acting purely as a mother. She was acting as a woman who had given years of her life to the service of this institution, and who had just been told in the clearest possible terms that certain doors remained closed to her regardless. Understanding that context makes Prince Edward's decision to end the call without a goodbye not just dramatic, but deeply revealing. Because Edward did not simply hang up the phone, he delivered a verdict. And the question now is what that verdict means for the family holding the pieces together. Edward and Camilla, a relationship built on tolerance, not trust. There is a version of the British royal family that the palace prefers the public to see. It is a version built on unity, on shared purpose, and on the carefully maintained appearance of a family that has worked through its differences and emerged stronger on the other side. In that version, Queen Camilla is a fully accepted and deeply respected member of the House of Windsor. Her relationships with the king's children and siblings are warm, her position within the institution is secure, and the complicated history that preceded her marriage to King Charles is treated as a closed chapter. It is a convincing picture, but it is not, according to those who know the family well, a complete one. And nowhere is the gap between the public picture and the private reality more visible than in the relationship between Prince Edward and Queen Camilla. To understand that relationship properly, it is necessary to go back to the beginning. not to the beginning of Camilla's marriage to King Charles in 2005, but to the decades that preceded it. Edward, the youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, grew up in a household shaped by the slow and painful unraveling of his brother's first marriage. He watched from the inside as the relationship between Charles and Diana became one of the most scrutinized and most damaging stories in the history of the modern monarchy. He saw what the public spectacle of that breakdown did to his family, to the institution, and to his mother, who bore the weight of it all with the kind of stoic dignity that defined her reign. And he knew, as all the royal children knew, that Camilla Parker Bowles was never far from the center of that story. That knowledge does not disappear simply because a wedding takes place. It does not dissolve because a title is conferred, or because official photographs are taken and released to a waiting press. For Edward, who is described by those close to him as a man with a long memory and a deep attachment to his mother's legacy, the acceptance of Camilla into the family was always going to be a process measured in years rather than moments. Sources who have observed the relationship between the two say that Edward made a decision early on to be civil, to be professional, and to present a united front in public. What he did not make, insiders say, was a decision to be close. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. People who have spent time around both Edward and Camilla describe their interactions as cordial but carefully bounded. There is no visible hostility. There are no public confrontations or pointed remarks captured by waiting cameras. Edward is far too disciplined for that, and Camilla is far too experienced in the art of managing perceptions. What observers describe instead is a relationship characterized by a particular kind of distance, the kind that is maintained not through coldness, but through a very precise management of proximity. They occupy the same institutional space. They attend the same events. They perform the same public duties. But the warmth that might signal genuine affection, the ease that marks a relationship built on real trust, is notably absent. Those close to Edward say his reservations about Camilla have never been primarily personal. He does not, according to insiders, dislike her as an individual in the way that tabloid narratives sometimes suggest. His concerns are more structural, more deeply rooted in his understanding of what the monarchy is and what it requires of the people who represent it. Edward has always been, by the accounts of those who know him well, profoundly committed to the institution itself. His work ethic, his relatively low public profile compared to other senior royals, and his willingness to take on duties that attract little glamour, all speak to a man who understands service in a serious and unglamorous way. And it is through that lens that his discomfort with certain aspects of Camilla's influence needs to be understood. The issue for Edward has never simply been who Camilla is. It has been what her position has enabled and what her instincts have sometimes produced. Sources say Edward has watched with growing unease as Camilla has gradually expanded the circle of people with meaningful access to the king and to the machinery of the royal household. Tom Parker Bowles is the most visible example of that expansion, but insiders suggest he is far from the only one. Over the years since the king's accession in September of 2022, Camilla has moved with quiet but unmistakable purpose to consolidate her position and to ensure that the people she trusts are positioned close to the center of power. To Edward, who places enormous value on the integrity of institutional boundaries, that kind of consolidation is not a neutral act. There is also the matter of Queen Elizabeth. Edward was, by all credible accounts, extraordinarily close to his mother. Her death in September of 2022 was not merely the loss of a monarch for him. It was the loss of the person who had anchored his understanding of what the royal family was supposed to be. And in the period following her death, as the new king settled into his reign and Camilla's influence visibly grew, Edward is said to have felt a quiet but persistent grief, not just for his mother, but for certain values and boundaries that he feared were being quietly renegotiated without proper acknowledgement of what was being lost. That grief, combined with his long-standing reservations about the expanding reach of Camilla's inner circle, created the emotional conditions for the phone call that ended without a goodbye. Edward did not end that call in a moment of anger. He ended it as a man who had been building toward that moment for years. A man who had tolerated, accommodated, and maintained his composure through years of quiet frustration. And who finally, in the space of a single phone call, decided he had said everything he was prepared to say. What remains to be examined is the specific territory that triggered that decision. Because Sandringham is not just an estate, it is a battlefield. And the fight over who controls it has been going on far longer than most people realize. Sandringham, power, and who controls. The Crown's properties. There are few places in Britain that carry the emotional and symbolic weight of Sandringham. Spanning roughly 20,000 acres of Norfolk countryside, the estate has been in royal hands since 1862, when it was purchased for the future King Edward VII. It has served ever since as the private heartland of the monarchy, the place where generations of royals have gathered at Christmas, where quiet decisions have been made away from the formal machinery of palace life, and where the family has always retreated when the pressure of public existence becomes too great to carry comfortably. Sandringham is not merely property, it is identity. And the question of who holds meaningful influence over it has always been, beneath the surface of royal life, a question about power itself. When King Charles inherited the throne following the death of Queen Elizabeth II in September of 2022, the question of how the Crown's private estates would be managed under the new reign became a matter of quiet but intense internal discussion. Sandringham, along with Balmoral, passed directly to Charles as personal possessions, rather than as part of the official Crown estate. That distinction matters enormously. It means that decisions about who accesses these properties, who is invited to spend time there, and who is asked to leave are not subject to the kind of institutional oversight that governs official royal residences. They are, in the most direct sense, personal decisions made by the king and by those closest to him. It is precisely that personal dimension that has made Sandringham the site of the current tension. Because when access to a private royal estate is granted or withdrawn, it is never simply an administrative decision. It is a signal. It tells the person receiving it exactly where they stand in the estimation of the people who matter most. And it tells everyone watching from the inside of that world exactly where the lines of trust and influence are currently being drawn. The removal of Tom Parker Bowles from Sandringham was understood immediately by those with knowledge of the situation as exactly that kind of signal, not a logistical adjustment, a statement of position. Sources familiar with the internal discussions surrounding the estate say that concerns about the management of Sandringham and the question of appropriate access had been circulating within certain parts of the royal household for some months before the decision regarding Tom was made. Those concerns were not, insiders emphasize, focused exclusively on Tom Parker Bowles. They were part of a broader conversation about how the estate should function under the new reign and about which relationships and which presences were genuinely appropriate within that private royal space. But Tom, given his profile and the frequency of his presence on the estate, became the most visible focal point of those discussions. Prince Edward's role in those discussions is described by sources as significant, but deliberately understated. He is not, by temperament or by choice, a man who pushes his views loudly or who seeks credit for decisions that are made collectively. But those familiar with the internal dynamics of the royal household say that Edward's perspective on the question of Sandringham access carried considerable weight. His long tenure as a working royal, his proximity to the late Queen's vision for the estate, and his deep personal investment in maintaining the integrity of the family's private spaces all gave his position a moral authority that was difficult to dismiss. What Edward reportedly argued, in the careful and measured way that characterizes his private communications, was that Sandringham needed to be protected from the kind of gradual expansion of access that had been quietly occurring. That the estate's value as a genuinely private family retreat depended on keeping its circle of presence tight and its boundaries clearly defined. Whether that argument was the decisive factor in the decision to remove Tom Parker Bowles, or whether it was one voice among several, insiders are reluctant to say definitively. What they do confirm is that when the decision was made, Edward was aware of it and did not oppose it. And when Camilla called him about it, he did not apologize for it either. Camilla's inner circle, and the royals who feel shut out. Power inside the British royal family has never been distributed evenly. It has always flowed toward those who are closest to the monarch, those who have mastered the art of being indispensable, and those who understand that influence within the institution is rarely seized openly, but is instead accumulated quietly, carefully, and over a very long period of time. Queen Camilla understands this better than almost anyone. She spent decades navigating the most hostile terrain imaginable within the royal world, enduring public contempt, institutional resistance, and the kind of sustained negative press that would have broken a less resilient person. And she emerged from all of it not merely intact, but positioned at the very center of the most powerful household in Britain. That did not happen by accident. It happened because Camilla is, by the accounts of those who have observed her closely, a far more strategically minded individual than her carefully cultivated image of relaxed informality suggests. The inner circle that Camilla has built around herself since becoming queen consort in September of 2022 is small, loyal, and deliberately constructed. At its center is her relationship with the king himself, a bond that has survived pressures that would have destroyed most marriages, and that now forms the immovable foundation of her position within the institution. But radiating outward from that central relationship is a network of trusted figures whose presence in her life serves both personal and strategic purposes. Tom Parker Bowles sits at the most visible point of that network. As her son, his loyalty is absolute, and his access to her is unrestricted in a way that no courtier or advisor could ever replicate. But his value to Camilla extends beyond the purely personal. He is also, in a very real sense, her eyes and ears in social and cultural spaces that the formal machinery of the palace does not easily reach. Sources who have spent time in circles adjacent to the royal household describe Tom as someone who moves with remarkable ease between the world of aristocratic tradition and the broader landscape of contemporary British cultural life. His career as a food writer and his presence in London's social scene give him access to conversations and relationships that exist well outside the formal boundaries of palace life. And those who know Camilla will say she values that access enormously. In a world where the monarchy is constantly navigating the challenge of remaining relevant to a public whose relationship with tradition is increasingly complicated, having someone like Tom operating in those spaces and feeding information and perspective back to the center is not a trivial advantage. But it is precisely this kind of strategic value that makes Tom's presence so troubling to those within the royal family who feel that Camilla's inner circle has grown too influential and too deeply embedded in spaces that should remain institutionally neutral. Prince Edward is not alone in that concern. Sources suggest that several members of the extended royal family have privately expressed unease about the degree to which Camilla's personal network has come to overlap with the formal structures of the royal household. The concern is not simply about Tom. It is about a pattern, a gradual, consistent expansion of Camilla's sphere of influence that has been occurring since long before the king's accession, and that has accelerated noticeably in the years since. What makes this pattern particularly sensitive is the way it intersects with the experiences of royals who do not belong to Camilla's inner circle, and who have found themselves navigating a household where the informal channels of influence are increasingly controlled by people whose primary loyalty is to the queen consort rather than to the institution as a whole. Several senior royals, according to insiders, have noticed that decisions which once would have been made through established institutional channels are increasingly being shaped by conversations that happen outside those channels, in the private spaces where Camilla and her trusted circle operate. For people like Edward, who believe deeply in the integrity of those institutional processes, that shift represents something more than a personal grievance. It represents a threat to the foundations of how the monarchy is supposed to function. The feeling of being shut out is not, sources emphasize, a new one for Edward. Even before the king's accession, those close to Edward say he had begun to notice a gradual recalibration of relationships within the family that seemed to track closely with Camilla's growing influence. Invitations that had once been extended automatically began to require more deliberate effort to secure. Conversations that had once flowed freely between siblings began to be filtered through intermediaries whose loyalties were not always transparent. Small things, individually dismissible, but collectively forming a picture that Edward found increasingly difficult to ignore. Since the king's diagnosis with cancer in February of 2024, those dynamics have intensified considerably. The king's illness has created an environment of heightened sensitivity around access and influence, with those closest to him becoming more protective and more selective about who enters his immediate orbit. Camilla, understandably, has become the primary gatekeeper of that orbit. And while few would begrudge a wife her instinct to protect an ailing husband, insiders say the practical effect has been to further narrow the circle of those with genuine access to the king and to further consolidate Camilla's position as the most influential figure in the household. For Edward, watching that consolidation unfold while simultaneously witnessing the expanding presence of Tom Parker Bowles in royal spaces like Sandringham created a pressure that eventually had to find an outlet. The decision to support or endorse Tom's removal from the estate was, in that context, not simply a judgment about one individual's appropriate access to a private property. It was a pushback against a broader pattern of influence that Edward and others have been watching with growing unease for years. And when Camilla called to challenge that pushback directly, she was not just defending her son. She was defending the architecture of influence she had spent years carefully building. The abrupt end of that phone call was Edward's answer. And it was an answer that has left the fracture between them more visible than it has ever been before. The fracture no one is officially acknowledging. There is a particular kind of tension that the British royal family has always been extraordinarily skilled at managing. It is the tension that exists not in the dramatic public ruptures that make headlines around the world, but in the quiet, carefully maintained distances that develop between people who must continue to appear unified, while privately navigating deep and unresolved conflict. It is the tension of the formal smile at a public engagement, the measured handshake where a genuine embrace once existed, the conversation that stays relentlessly surface level because both parties understand that going deeper would open wounds that cannot be closed in public. That is the tension that now exists between Prince Edward and Queen Camilla, and according to those with knowledge of the situation, it is not a tension that either side is remotely close to resolving. In the months following the phone call, sources say the relationship between Edward and Camilla has settled into a state of functional frost. They continue to appear at the same events. They continue to perform the rituals of royal unity with the professional composure that both have spent lifetimes developing. But the warmth that might once have characterized even their carefully managed interactions has largely evaporated. Those who have observed them in the same room since the incident describe an atmosphere of deliberate neutrality, the kind that requires active effort to maintain and that signals to anyone paying close attention that the natural ease of the relationship has been replaced by something more guarded and more brittle. What is particularly striking about the current state of affairs is the degree to which it is being officially ignored. The palace, true to its long-established instinct for managing uncomfortable realities through strategic silence, has offered nothing. No acknowledgement of the phone call, no comment on Tom Parker Bowles and his relationship with Sandringham, no statement addressing the reported tensions between the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen Consort. From the official perspective of the royal household, none of this is happening. And that official silence, insiders say, is itself a form of communication. Because the palace does not stay silent about things that do not matter. It stays silent about things that matter enormously, and that it does not know how to address without making them worse. The question of what happens next is one that those close to both Edward and Camilla are reluctant to answer directly. There is no obvious mechanism for resolution. The removal of Tom Parker Bowles from Sandringham is not the kind of decision that is easily reversed without appearing to capitulate to pressure, and Edward is not the kind of man who reverses positions under pressure. Camilla, for her part, is not a woman who forgets slights or who quietly absorbs challenges to her position without registering them for future reference. The two of them are, in that sense, remarkably well matched in their stubbornness, which is precisely why those who know them both well express little optimism about a swift or easy reconciliation. There is also the matter of the king himself. Charles occupies an almost impossible position in this conflict. He is the husband of one party and the brother of the other. He loves them both, in the complicated and imperfect way that a man shaped by decades of emotional difficulty loves the people closest to him. And he is, at the same time, a man dealing with a serious illness whose energy for managing family conflict is considerably more limited than it once was. Sources say the king is aware of the tension between Edward and Camilla. He would have to be extraordinarily disconnected from his own household not to be. But his capacity and his appetite for intervening directly in a dispute this charged and this personal are, according to insiders, severely constrained by the realities of his health and by his own understanding of how little direct intervention tends to achieve in conflicts of this nature. What the fracture between Edward and Camilla ultimately reveals is something important and uncomfortable about the state of the modern monarchy. The image of unity that the institution projects with such discipline and such consistency is, like all images, a construction. Beneath it lies a family navigating the same complicated dynamics of loyalty, resentment, ambition, and grief that any family navigating profound change must contend with. The difference is that this family must navigate those dynamics while simultaneously performing cohesion for an audience of millions, while managing the weight of centuries of tradition, and while operating within an institution whose survival depends in no small part on the public's continued willingness to believe in that performance. The removal of Tom Parker Bowles from Sandringham and the phone call that ended without a goodbye are, in isolation, small incidents. But small incidents inside the royal family are rarely truly small. They are symptoms. They are the visible tips of conflicts whose roots run deep and whose implications stretch far beyond the immediate parties involved. The fracture between Edward and Camilla is not simply a disagreement between a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law over a private estate. It is a window into the unresolved tensions at the heart of a family and an institution that is still, years after the most painful chapters of its modern history, working out what it is, who belongs within it, and where the boundaries of trust and influence are truly supposed to lie. And until those questions are answered honestly, the smiles of public engagements will continue, the official silences will continue, and the fractures will continue to deepen quietly beneath a surface that the palace will insist, against all available evidence, remains entirely unbroken. Do you think Prince Edward was right to end that call, or did he cross a line that cannot easily be uncrossed? The tension between Edward and Camilla is no longer something the palace can paper over with polished appearances.